Okay, class, in this chapter we're looking at how to use presentation aids with your speeches or with a presentation. As you know, we are visual learners. Most of us are. And it's good to see along with the verbal delivery of a presentation. So how do we use visual aids, presentation aids? We're going to look at the PowerPoint from your chapter, and I'll add some other information in as well. And basically you see we're going to be looking at what are types of presentation aids, how do you determine what's best for your particular presentation, how do you craft one, what are the common methods of displaying your aids, how can you use presentation software, which is highly recommended to either use PowerPoint or Prezi. In this day and age, technology is here, and it's important that you use it in your presentation. So what type of presentation aids? Actually, there's many things that we can use, and I'm going to quickly go through these slides. Is that, it definitely has to be related to your topic. It should not take away from your verbal communication. If you have something that's unusual, then you want to bring that in when you are referencing it. Okay, but actual items such as people, animals, objects, models, it's important that your whole audience can see this model, that it gets your audience's attention. Photographs. You do not want to pass photographs around in an audience. Usually and most likely, wherever you deliver a speech or a presentation, whether it's at school or at work, there would be some type of document camera that will enlarge the photograph. If you have to use that photograph, use some type of system that enlarges that particular photograph, or any type of drawing that you may have that you cannot put up in a PowerPoint slide, but you need to enlarge for your audience. Charts and tables, these work really well when you're presenting a lot of data to offer a pie chart or a graph, because again, when you just feed your audience numbers, they cannot download this data. It's important that you have some type of chart that they can reference. Along with charts, we have graphs, and this just gives you different examples of graphs, and you can see this in your textbook as well. Media. Well, in my particular speech classes, I'm okay with using like a 15-second, 20-second video that highlights what you are verbally saying, because we know there's a lot of good footage available for us to use as a video or as a visual aid. But you know what? You don't want to go beyond that, because then that takes over the presentation. Multimedia, as we know, we could use choreographed productions, presentation aids. We have, as you know, PowerPoint, Prezi, which is again recommended for this particular class. How do you determine? Again, think about the purpose. Don't just throw in visual aids just for the sake of it. Think about how this works to help your audience to understand your key concepts and information. Select the best type, obviously, for you, for your topic, for your audience, for the situation. You go back to, where are you speaking? What is the occasion? What can you use as a visual aid that everybody can see? For instance, if you're at a commencement speech, you're not going to show a small model to 1,000 people. You want to consider, your occasion and what type of visual aid would work best for that particular occasion. Other factors to consider, as I just mentioned, the size of the audience, your comfort level of how you want to incorporate this particular visual aid, the availability of equipment, the cost, the effectiveness. Again, you could spend a lot of money on production of particular visual aids, and not necessarily for this class, but I'm thinking ahead in your careers, in your workplace. So consider that of how you will use them and the cost. Chalkboards and whiteboards, if you are in a classroom or some type of situation, you don't want to be a teacher, okay? You want to have the visual aid up front. You want to have everything written out beforehand and then reference it as you are speaking about it. As this PowerPoint mentions, it can be considered unprofessional. Yeah, writing, unless you have very good handwriting, it's not necessarily a presentation aid. Again, you have to determine the occasion, the type of speech you're delivering, if it's appropriate for that particular speech. Posters are kind of out, but if you need to use a poster or a flipboard, great for small groups. But again, if you have the technology with PowerPoint, use that. However, sometimes, as you see in this PowerPoint, we have a drawing, an architectural drawing. Obviously that would work really well for that particular type of speech. Handouts, okay, big thing here. When you are delivering any type of speech, wherever it is, you do not hand things around to your audience or to your audience during your presentation. It's either before or after. Okay, so handouts, if you want something that they reference as you're speaking, you hand it out before, start speaking. Or let's say it's a persuasive speech and this is a vehicle at the end, in other words, how they will do what you want them to do at the very end of your speech, then you hand things out to your audience. Flip charts are very similar to posters, and again, good for small group presentations, not necessarily a formal presentation. Advanced technology, as your book looks at, is what I've been referencing as far as PowerPoint Prezi, some type of PowerPoint presentation. Now, the big thing with students, and what I see with PowerPoint presentations, and this, if you're online and you're recording your speech, or if you're going to be live in a classroom, it's real important that you do not read off of your PowerPoint slides. First of all, your back will be to the audience. Secondly, it's condescending to your audience that you're reading to us. That's not presenting, okay? So you have a PowerPoint slide and then you reference your note cards as you're speaking. The deal with a PowerPoint slide is that you don't want, and let me go back to this one, you don't want a lot of information on the slide. Usually just a couple key terms and maybe a graphic, okay? Couple key terms and a graphic. There's something called the 6-second rule with a PowerPoint slide. If your audience cannot comprehend that slide or the visual aid in 6 seconds, it's not a good visual aid. Sometimes, and a lot of times, we're tempted to write a lot of information on our PowerPoint slides. Don't go there. It's not a good presentation. Give yourself enough time to be creative. Obviously, the more time you give yourself, the better production you will have, better production of your visual aids, and better production of your speech. Software, again, PowerPoint slide. If you don't have PowerPoint on your computer, go to your local campus, and it's available on all hack computers. And the steps for creating a storyboard, and again, what I recommend is kind of put together in your mind a theme, write it out perhaps in writing, and then create your PowerPoint slides. Okay. Basics with PowerPoint, and I will show you the comedy of PowerPoint, but we don't want wild colors, we don't want different types of fonts. We want to be sure that it's simple, that you have enough white space, that it does not include a lot of different types of sounds. We could spend a lot of time putting together our PowerPoint slides, and again, we just want something simple with graphics and key points. How do you use your presentation aids successfully? Again, this is part of the professionalism as a speaker. You want to be sure that you proofread them, that you previewed them, that they're professional looking. Check your equipment. I tell students when you're speaking in a classroom that you come in early, you set up your PowerPoint slide, make sure it's on go so that you are ready to present. That's part of presentation, presentation techniques, that when you're presenting, you need to be ready when it's your turn to go. If you have something unusual, some type of artwork, a Picasso, you don't want the Picasso to be sitting there next to you as you're speaking. You want to bring it in when you are referencing that particular information. And that's it for the chapter on presentation aids. You just want to be aware of how you use your aids, your presentation aids, that you are incorporating professional visual aids in your particular speeches, and that if you're using a PowerPoint, which again is recommended, that your slides are very basic with key points and perhaps a graphic, or maybe it's just a graphic, but you don't want a lot of wording. You want to think about the 6-second rule. What are the types of visual aids, the actual items in your demonstration speech? You may actually show us what the end product will be. You will actually show us how to do it. So you'll have these actual items in front of your audience. Be sure that everybody can see what you're doing. If the person in the back of the room cannot see what you do before your speech, you ask everybody to gather and come up to the front of the class. Very important that we can view your visual aids. The use of models can gain the attention of your audience. If it works for your speech, use models, or you could develop or create some type of model on a PowerPoint slide. The use of photographs or any kind of document. Great, because you know what, it's the only thing that you can use is that particular photograph. We have a document camera in class, and I'm sure I will show that to you, or I have shown it to you, where it enlarges the photograph so everybody can see it 10 feet by 10 feet on the screen. So photographs work well as well. Drawings, again, you could use the document camera to show these drawings, these maps. Charts and tables, again, you can easily create charts and tables, graphs, bar graphs, line graphs using PowerPoint. But be careful, you're not feeding us too much data, because then it becomes overwhelming for your audience. That's my dog Ruka barking at a squirrel. Okay, So we also have pie graphs. The use of media. Hey, I have no problem, and I kind of recommend it, perhaps if it works, to you bring in a short clip, video clip, YouTube, no longer than 30 seconds, 15 to 30 seconds at the most. If this is what you need to help us understand what you're conveying, again, you don't want it to overtake your speech. However, you need to have it all set up beforehand, ready to go, so you just click while you're speaking, it comes on, and then it goes off. Multimedia, videos, graphs, text, choreographed production. Again, what we're looking at here is, let's say you're using PowerPoint, and the way this works is that you'll come to class a little bit early, 5 minutes before class. Bring your information on a flash drive. Now, sometimes students have it emailed to themselves, but flash drive tends to work the best. We load you up on the computer. We have your whole presentation set up, ready to go before class. So when it's your turn to speak, you just click on it and you are ready to go. So again, if you're using PowerPoint or any type of multimedia, any type of computer use, make sure you have it set up before you speak. It's all part of the presentation technique to be prepared, ready to go when you're ready to speak. How do you determine what presentations to use? Think about what brings home the message, okay? It's very important that you establish the purpose of your visual aids. Think about what works best for you, what works best for your audience as far as a presentation aid, what they can see, how do you consider to display them. Think about the size of your audience. Think about the cost, the effectiveness. I tell students, if it's something very unusual, like a very unusual piece of artwork, you do not want that sitting out throughout your speech and then reference it. You want to put it aside. You want to have it out of sight, and then when you're ready to reference that visual aid, you bring it out so that your audience can see it. Because what happens is that everybody looks at that unusual piece of visual aid and they're not listening to you. What are the common methods of displaying visual aids? Chalkboards, whiteboards. We have a whiteboard. If you need to use a whiteboard, again, listen up if you've been tuning me out. Prepare your information before the speech, not while you're speaking. You're not a teacher, you're a presenter. So you put your information on the whiteboard and then you reference it when you're speaking. The use of posters is pretty much on the out right now, unless it's the only thing that you can use because you do not have sophisticated technology or equipment available. Real good for like a small group at a table, if you're at a meeting and you need to present information. Handouts, you know, sometimes for your demonstration speech, students will provide a handout on how to create this object or this item at the end of their speech. So one thing about handouts, and again, this is a key point, is that you want to hand everything out either before or after your speech. Either before and then start speaking, or after, when you're done, provide everybody a handout. The reason is because they can be very distracting, and we don't want things floating around while you're speaking. Again, we don't want things floating around the audience, things being distributed in the audience while you're speaking. The use of flip charts, again, good for small group presentation, and advanced technology, as you know, PowerPoint or Prezi, excellent presentation skills. You know, when you are putting together your visual aid, it's important to be professional. Always think professionalism when you're presenting, and it's important to be consistent with your design. A lot of times when we are putting together our slides for PowerPoint, we think we need to put a lot of information. Well, there's something called the 6x6 rule, okay? First of all, if your audience does not get your visual aid in 6 seconds, it's too complicated, okay? And you should only have very few points on your presentation slide. For instance, let's look at this slide. We have a graphic, we have a title, and then we have our 4 bullets. This is the most you should have on a presentation slide. You don't want a lot of information. You want just very key points that you will discuss. You're not looking at your visual as you're speaking. You just have it up there so that it reiterates what you're speaking about. When you're putting together your PowerPoint, you can create a storyboard beforehand, and these next couple slides show you how to put together, well, this slide here, excuse me, how you put together your storyboard beforehand, and then you put together your PowerPoint slides. Now, just some basics, and I don't know if you had a chance to watch the funny version of how to put together a PowerPoint slide, but be sure that you don't use wild colors, that you use a lot of white space, that your text is large enough, that you may have one image. Think about the sound factor. You may not want sound, or if you do, want it to be very minimal, okay? When you're using the presentation aids, don't just use the spell check or spell cheek, as our friend says in our video, but be sure that you read over all your words and that they're correctly spelled. And check your equipment. Again, here's don't pass items around, and prepare a backup plan, because sometimes our presentation or our PowerPoint just doesn't work. So maybe you have it on a handout for yourself that you can then present. It won't be as good, but you could still present. Okay. Use the touch, turn, talk method. This is important because you know what, as I mentioned, sometimes what students do is that, let's say I'm presenting to you, and they'll look at their slide and they'll talk about it like this. Okay, everyone look at this, and the next thing you do is, and they're speaking to the slide. You always keep your eyes on the audience, always speak to your audience members. You may reference and then speak about it, okay? But what I do recommend is that you have that information on your note cards and not look at the screen that often. It's also important too, if you're using a PowerPoint, that if you have a slide, let's say you have just 2 slides and you're done with that second slide, you want a blank slide afterwards, so that that slide that is not pertinent to what you're saying verbally is up, and it might be confusing for some of your audience members. Also, think about too, if in your presentation you have one slide, you talk about that one slide, and then you talk about something that is not, that you don't have a visual aid for, and you don't have a slide. You want a blank slide then. And then you have something that you're talking about, and you have a visual aid, you want to present that slide. So think about blank slides in between if the visual aid is not connecting to what you are verbally saying. And that concludes our chapter on presentation aids. Again, just a couple key things to remember. Okay, make sure that your visual aids are large enough for everybody to see. That if there's a chance that you are demonstrating and someone cannot see, have us all come up. If you're handing things out at any presentation, you want to hand out in the very beginning or at the very end. You don't want things floating around in the audience during the speech. If you're using technology, set yourself up before class so everything is ready to go. Think about the technology or the PowerPoint slides you're using. Are they put together in a consistent manner? Are all the slides with blue background? Are you using the same font throughout the whole presentation, the whole PowerPoint? Do you just have key points? Think about your delivery while you're using a visual aid, that you're speaking to your audience, not to your visual aid, not to the screen. And lastly, just practice. And as you're practicing, bring in your visual aids and they will work just fine for you.